maybe a good place to begin would be, the question sort of what is metaphysics and why does it matter? Well, why should an ordinary person care about this kind of thing?
Yeah, and it feels like a slightly tricky question to answer, considering that lots of people will have different ideas of what we mean by metaphysics.
Yeah,
I know
exactly.
that people in some of my online social media communities might be like, oh yeah, metaphysics, that means some kind of spiritual system or some kind of philosophy around God and
Mhm.
reality. And yeah, there's so many different, possible interpretations. So maybe let's get really specific.
Yeah, yeah. Another common one that people I think come with is metaphysics means anything that's sort of unscientific or outside of the realm of science or something like that.
Yeah, like beyond physics,
Yeah.
some kind of magic or unphysical properties.
Questions that can't be answered.
Mm. Yeah, yeah. So what do we mean by metaphysics in sync?
Yeah, I mean, t I think beyond physics is a good place to start in terms of orienting a discussion of what metaphysics is. When we think of physics, we usually think of, I suppose, like laws of nature that are responsible for coordinating the phenomena that we can observe in the environment that we are situated in. Um, and metaphysics is more like, I guess, the general principles that uh, must be true in order for an environment like this to even exist,
Hmm.
I suppose.
Right. So the laws of physics might be positing some kind of physical structure, but the laws themselves, like where do they exist? Where do they come from? Is kind
Where
of
do they
like a
come from?
question about, yeah, how can laws be physical?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and yeah, what results in there being a physical world with such and such laws, when conceivably they could have been different than
Yeah.
that.
Well, where do we even start with answering that question?
Yeah, that's a good question.
I'm glad you asked. I have something prepared here.
Um, well, quick before we move on, I think to trying to address some of the subject matter, maybe we could talk a little bit about why it matters because I feel like that's an important touchstone for people. From where my perspective on why it matters is uh, that metaphysics is sort of about first principles. So if we want, and I think a lot of people do want, a kind of a unifying conception of reality or the way the world works, it's important to ask questions about the general conditions that make physical phenomena possible, because otherwise we're leaving an explanatory gap in arguably like the most important place in the model. And this means that when we have different pieces of the puzzle that kind of don't appear to fit together, and I really like that puzzle metaphor because we get pieces and it's like we're pretty sure these are genuine pieces of the puzzle. They're true. Quantum physics and relativity are really good examples of this,
Hmm.
and then we're just not sure how they go together. Like, what bigger picture do these things form? And having a sense of what the right direction is in terms of a metaphysics, I think gives us a good idea of what the outline. When you're solving a puzzle, there's the edge pieces,
Mm.
and a good
It's
strategy is
always
always
easier with the edge pieces. Yeah.
exactly, yeah. Once you get the edge pieces in place, you can kind of work your way inward and figure
Mm.
out sort of relative to those edge pieces what orientation these pieces have and how they might go together. So
Yeah. There's definitely a sense that within kind of a mainstream physicalist position that metaphysics is rejected in some way and that it's kind of like, well, we don't need it because either with the puzzle piece analogy, we may not have the edges, but at some point we will, and that answer or that edge piece will look like something that fits into our paradigm of physicalism. So let's just reject metaphysics on the presumption that at some point we will have some answers that satisfy our physicalist needs.
mm-hmm.
And you've just released a really nice article on physicalism and materialism that I think addresses this quite well as the kind of rejection of metaphysics outright.
Yeah, yeah. I think part of the problem with that way of trying to solve the conundrum is that physics in giving an explanation always appeals to variables or laws of nature which have the character of contingency. That is, it's the way that the world happens to be, but it might not have been that way. The world could have been different than it in fact is. And, when you're looking for those edge pieces, my thought is that those edge pieces have to be of a certain nature, like to be an edge pieces, to not, you can't, it doesn't go any further beyond that. You know what I mean?
Right.
And what it means for it to not go further is to have reached a kind of ground or boundary point, a non-contingency, where, beyond that point, it's self-explanatory. Why doesn't the picture extend beyond that? Well, it stops there. Like the very definition of the shape of the piece means that it can't go any further. And so it seems like if what we're looking to do is, well, we'll just work our way outward and eventually these middle pieces will give us the whole picture, that just doesn't seem like a plausible strategy, because the kind of piece that we're looking for to give us the edge is of a different sort than the middle pieces, which are physical relations.
Yeah, there's this tendency to think that we can just infinitely keep adding middle pieces that don't have the structure of that outer piece until we get an answer. Or the answer is just an infinite regression of middle pieces in some sense. And again, you explore the reason why this is not a rational position, or almost like a rejection of an answer in some sense.
Mm-hmm. Yeah,
in your article.
Yeah, and part of what I talk about is that it seems like, to sort of say, well, and this is what physicalism is a kind of, it purports to be, a metaphysical, a statement or a stance on metaphysics, but really it amounts to sort of saying, as you pointed out, well, we don't really need we don't need to formulate specific edge pieces. We can just kind of work our way outward. And I think that always leaves a gap. And the idea that, we can just engage in an endless process of working our way outward, that I think is very similar to sort of an infinite regression where, you never reach a starting point. And the point of the edge pieces is that they give you the orientation of the total picture, and they give you a place to work inward from, such that all the pieces fitting together make sense, right? If you don't have that starting point, how does the picture get, how do you, I guess, why would there be a picture in the first place? Why can't the pieces just be in a jumble, or not? Why would there be any pieces at all? The whole point of a puzzle is that it can be solved, and it's solved because there's a termination point. There's something, there's pieces that there aren't any further pieces. Those are sort of the foundational orienting frame of the whole paradigm. And unless you have pieces like that, it's hard to see how you make sense of the idea that there would be any kind of picture to be found at all.